Now, here's a message from friends of the show.
In a world headed for disaster, 5 strangers with mysterious pasts are thrown together by the winds of fate to try to stop the unseen forces that threaten to destroy their world. Join Craval, a dragonborn with no memory and no past, who is the first of the barbarians of the mountains to be seen in 1,000 years. Cotter, a penniless paladin, running from something or someone in his past. No one, the only tiefling monk the kingdom has ever seen, who has been expelled from his monastery for reasons he has not revealed. Adri, his monastic companion, who hides some deep dark secret she cannot reveal. And Arlen, once a simple farmer, until some mysterious event manifested sorceress powers in him. They must travel the length and breadth of the kingdom of Faroe, searching for the disparate clues that will help them unravel the mystery of the failing of their land, while trying to hold together the unraveling threads of society's weave, threatening to come apart at any moment. They will have to battle nature, plague, politics, and even the forces of the underworld as they attempt to discover and defeat whoever, or whatever, is attempting to poison their world and throw it into chaos. Relic of the Past is a novel-length story told via a clean, custom, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game. Find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever fine podcasts are found, and at poolmedia.podbean.com.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode. I'm really excited to be getting back into another interview again. It's been a while since we've had someone join us on the show today. But before we introduce them, Mr. Myers, Mr. Mueller, good evening. How are things, Mr. Myers, wherever you happen to be this evening?
Connecticut.
Oh, that's right. You haven't left Connecticut yet. That's right.
Yeah, we'll be here till the end of November now. We actually extended a little bit. We were not coming back after a catacon. We were going to head for Virginia Beach then, but we decided to come back up and stay through Thanksgiving since we're not going to be here for Christmas.
Nice. Aw, that's. So how about you, Mr. Miller? How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. It's been a busy week. We had our big end of summer family barbecue bash this past weekend, which was fun. Awesome. Great food. If I do say so myself, I cooked a lot of it. Great
Everything
music.
Pastrami was good.
Yeah. New recipes on the homemade pastrami. I was very pleased. I did some singing, had a good time with that. And we had a good friend of mine from my Monday night home game, Steven. He came by with boffer swords and did some demos and let some of the older kids goof around, even some of the younger kids goof around with some boffer swords and some sword play. Gave him, it wasn't a serious class, but it was have some fun banging sticks. And it was a good time. It was a great time.
At least they're padded sticks, right?
Yeah, and they're padded sticks. It's better than the ones that Glen and I scarred ourselves up with.
I was going to say, you can't do any real damage with those. Yeah.
Lies.
But I mean, as well as the barbecue, and as much as we want to go ahead and continue here about the various meats that were served, of course, in Tabletop Journeys news, big update for today. So we're recording this a week in advance, but I can almost guarantee that by the time people are hearing this, I probably have not been sleeping for the last 24 hours because our second Kickstarter for book number 4 launched yesterday. Hopefully it is all over social media that we funded in 37 minutes or whatever record-breaking.
You for your part in that.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you haven't had the chance to back yet, make sure you look up The Traveler's Guide to Factions on Kickstarter right now and get in on the action. Plenty of information. If you're curious what's in the Traveler's Guide to Factions, make sure you listen to last week's episode. We went through all the content on the show here.
But believe it or not, last week's episode is about the Traveler's Guide to Factions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I got to say it one more time.
As one does.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of Kickstarter, tonight let's go ahead and bring in tonight's guest, who by the time the episode airs, you will have just launched your Kickstarter campaign for Eye of Everywhere. Mr. Alan Tucker, thank you very much for joining us on Tabletop Journeys.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So for folks that aren't familiar with the work that you're putting out there and everything, give the rundown as far as who you are and the work that you've been doing.
Sure. I've been writing. I started out writing novels in 2009 or so, published a few of those, and then after becoming an empty nester, decided to get back into my old hobbies that I hadn't done for about 25 years or so, and got back into 5th edition and some other tabletop games, and decided to start creating stuff for that. Began with some things on the DM's Guild, I think in 2017. and have had participated in a number of projects since then, either by myself or with a whole host of other folks. Things like Artifacts on the Guild was one of the first big ones that we did. And I've led several projects here recently, Incredible Creatures, Incredible Items. Just got done early this year with Apocalypse, the complete GM's Guide to Ending Your World.
That sounds like
That sounds fun. Yeah.
I had a ton of terrific people work on that. And now we're doing this new project, which actually I've been working on for probably close to 5 years, called The Eye of Everywhere. And it is ready to add some sci-fi spice to your fantasy for either 5th edition or Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Cool. Okay.
Excellent.
It sounds fascinating, and I can't wait to dive in here a little bit to go ahead and see what's in here. Per the course, gentlemen, D20s to the ready. Let's get initiative rolled and see who gets to go
we must
first.
roll initiative to see who goes first.
Got my nice silicon fan roll dice out here, cracking out here. I love these because they don't make that like annoying clacky clack sound when you roll it. Like, everyone thinks that when you're on an actual play that like the clacky clack sound is going to sound great, and it's awful. It's awful.
Right.
So
If it's on a hard surface like wood, yeah, it is. It's jarring and sharp.
it's jarring. It's just As the audio engineer in the group, I can tell you it's horrible. So
I've got a 12, gentlemen.
16.
That's a 17 for me.
Oh,
Wow,
Josh is going first on the
All
17.
right, so I'm scooping Glen. All right. So, Alan, the first thing I wanted to dive into was you said that you came to tabletop role-playing game writing with a background as a novelist, that you posted a couple of novels in the last few years and everything like that. So I wanted to talk about how you get into your tabletop role-playing game content. What is your kind of world-building process? Do you start with stories that you want to tell or characters that you want to write about, or do you start like on the setting side and start big and work small, or start small and work big, or is it somewhere in between?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I would have to say I've probably done all of the above at one time or another.
Sure, yeah.
It depends. World building, I probably do more of a macro approach to that first, because I think it's important to have a lot of consistency in your magic system and other, just all of those big things that have to do with world building. But if I'm just getting ready to do a campaign for a group, I want to really focus on character at that point and the story that we want to try to tell.
Cool. Yeah, I realize that's probably one of those questions that any writer goes whatever different direction based on what they're feeling at that particular time. So yeah, I saw Glenn. I saw you raising your hand when he was saying that too. That I'm sure that as the other kind of like more formal writer in the group, you've probably gone both directions on that also, right?
I've attacked the problem from all three directions.
Yeah.
Micro, macro, and in between. Absolutely.
And in between, yeah.
It really depends on where your starting inspiration is.
Yeah.
If I start out envisioning this landscape kingdom kind of place, I'm probably going to start macro. But if I start out with just like a prophecy centered around a single object and the world builds up from there, that can happen too.
Yeah. Yep.
Oftentimes I'll look at whatever the ending is that I want. If I have an ending in mind for either a story or a campaign or something like that, then that may be ironically the starting point of how you go through and build everything.
Yeah. Yep.
So I tend to be a little start with the micro and build to the macro. I tend to get there quickly, but generally the things that inspire me to start writing about a group or an event or a project is an individual scene. Sometimes it's a character interaction. Sometimes it's different things, but honestly, it's usually just the environment. Encounter maps on Pinterest are huge sources of inspiration for me. I literally envision action in a scene. I used to tell people all the time, one of the coolest things that I've ever done for my writing process was take a walk through a place I've never been. Doesn't matter whether it's a natural environment or a mall or some city or just some random building, libraries and all of those old buildings like the Thomas Crane Library in Quincy, Massachusetts. It's one of my favorite pieces of architecture. Some of the old fortresses in various places in New England. I literally walk in there and all of a sudden my mind immediately says, I can see X fighting Y here. Or I can see the big dramatic scene between the king and the knave here. I just picture those events. Then what do I have to do to build to that kind of scene? And then I'm off to the races. I tend to start on that micro level, but then I get large very well, because as soon as you say king in the nave, you can't say the word king without having a kingdom. So it's get the scene, jump to the macro, then build back in and to fill in the gaps and make sure it all makes sense.
I think I'm almost exclusively a middle of the road, because almost everything that I write starts with the thread of the story in between it. And then I'm affixing pieces on the arc as I need them. If hero goes to the kingdom, then the kingdom is necessary. But what does the journey require? What's the horse's name? What's the road that they're on? What's the train that they're in? Who are the hero's friends? All that sort of thing. So I'm letting the story dictate whether I need to go bigger or smaller from there.
I thought he was going to scoop me with the softball first question, but he didn't. So I'm going to give you the softball first question of your upcoming Kickstarter, which is what we're here to talk about, is called The Eye of Everywhere. And I've been going through the documents that you sent to us, and I am intrigued and fascinated. I got to say, I love blending technology and magic together. I actually did a big thing in Rifts of creating a larger techno-magic system. I think all of that is fantastic. The environment or the setting in which the eye exists, it smacks of the restaurant at the end of the universe, plus Sigil, plus a number of other places, except you actually have one portal that can be controlled as opposed to a gazillion portals. So it very much creates that you can go anywhere, you can do anything, jumping off point or hub for adventure. But those are my words. So my question is, would you give us your words? Talk to us about what the Eye of Everywhere is, what the project encompasses, and what it means to you.
You bet. It, like you said, the eye itself is a giant portal, and there are creatures and vehicles and things going in and out all the time. And it is controlled by a group of entities called the Wardens. And they have a means to encode the destination. When you go through the portal, you are encoded with a destination and that you're going to. It can literally send you anywhere in the multiverse. The portal itself is a giant ball, basically, about 200 feet across. And around it is a planar disc, which has a city on both sides. So around the portal itself is zero gravity. And then as you get to the inside edge of that disc, gravity will establish depending on which side you happen to be on. And so there's buildings on one side there appear to be, if they're going down, and then on the other side going up, etc. And then there within that city called Scalera is a number of factions, which you guys are going to be quite familiar with at this point.
We've been living in faction world, yes.
Yes,
I got questions on that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a dozen of those in total that are all sanctioned by the Wardens, and within the city, of course, commerce and everything else happens, politics, etc. For the campaigns that I've run with this, I've used it more as an adventure hub where the parties will come and then they may work for, there's a faction called the Abettors League, which is basically a group of mercenaries that work throughout the multiverse. And so one easy way to set up campaigns there is to have the group work for the Abettors League, and they get sent on missions across the multiverse. I've had games where one session I had them going through, they were searching a wizard's tower for a particular book that had been stolen from the Institute, which is another one of the factions, and they're a repository of knowledge. And then the next week they were sent to a space station and were fighting off an invading alien army. And so it is just anything goes. And it has been a tremendous amount of fun. The players have loved it just for the variety's sake. And that to me is the crux of the whole thing, is just being able to do anything and everything when you want to.
I love it. It speaks directly to my Rift's heart, because one of the things I loved about the Rift's universe is the first world I ran across where anything was possible. It was so genre blending. And I really like when people take games and make them like that, where you could be anything you want. You could be a space marine or a wizard of old. And I think that's really groovy.
Absolutely. I love the idea of an adventure hub, especially for newer storytellers and GMs and DMs. One of the hardest thing to do is, how do I string together this massive campaign if I don't want to buy thick book X with railroads and guidelines Y through Z? One of the easiest answers is have a setting that has some innate nature, some innate story and plot threads that you can pull on when you're there, but go ahead and step outside of that. You've got a party that can do this to get started. They run a couple missions in the local neighborhood. They get picked up by the Abettors League, and now you can go anywhere. You could literally buy a simple module off of DM's Guild or Drive-Thru that's in Forgotten Realms and just run it. You could then buy a Starfinder module if you're playing the Pathfinder rules and run that. You can buy any 5e compatible adventure, and these abettors have just gone there. And as a storyteller, you can decide, go with the gear you've already had, or you could treat it more like a Federation kind of thing. Look, you got to go in there and pretend to be like the locals. So if they only use these types of things, when you drop into that world, you only use those type of things, other than your communicator and your coded thing, so you can get back. We'll pick you up at such and such a time. So you just build in the clock. So now they can't be wandering around aimlessly. You literally have X amount of days to finish the mission and get back to a very specific point. And the tension is all of the things that go into getting back to that point. It's all at once. All those great 80s television shows we used to know and love, Quantum Leap and Journeyman and all of those types of things, all in one thing. And you can do a different kind of game every session. I wish there was more of that when I was a novice, because you had to figure it out as you were going.
Recently, something that Wizards did well with Journey to the Radiant Citadel, they did it well with the Candlekeep Mysteries. They famously did it poorly with the Strixhaven book and Spelljammer. Like, that's so they have tried this model a couple times with success in both directions. And so, we loved the Candlekeep book, and Journey to the Radiant Citadel was fabulous, and Strixhaven was
not
awful.
I was going to say decidedly not, but okay.
Decidedly not, yeah.
Cool. Sticking with the positive, I just love the ability to say, use this for any kind of game you want to run at your table. Here's a template. Knock yourselves out, and while you're at it, share some great stories.
Because it just leaves so much room for creativity.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have a long-term story thread in mind, but you want to get started playing something, like you say, you can have these guys go do this in the Forgotten Realms, or go do this on Galarian if you want to play Pathfinder, and then you come back, and having those games then, or those 2 or 3 sessions maybe that they go and they do these missions, that then you might be able to start picking some of those threads and say, hey, you know what? This was really cool. Let's bring this back and tie it in later on. And maybe somebody they fought got away, and you can say, okay, let's bring them back later. And it lends itself to that. And also, speaking along a kind of a West Marches type of thing, this is perfect for that as well. Mm. If you want to have multiple GMs, you can have this is your hub, and then they can run anything they want to out of that. It's, again, just that flexibility is really what I wanted it to begin with, and I just love the mixing of the peanut butter and the chocolate, and it's just tremendous fun. So.
The removal of limitations. You don't usually think of a genre as a limitation, but it is. If you're playing high fantasy, that's a limitation on where your game can go, right?
Speaking about where all the things can go, that kind of brings me to my first question. Looking through your history and your catalog, which is vast, I saw somewhere upwards of 30 plus titles on the DM's Guild, and a vast array of titles there. Someone could literally take this and just play from the titles you have and run multiple campaigns from. I think we should be clear about that. You are prolific on the DM's Guild as far as I'm concerned. Really good stuff is there. Some stuff that during the research for this episode, I'm like, man, I wish I'd come across this a little earlier. I now have another list to add to the wish list so I can start picking up a few things because I really like what I've seen there.
Thank you.
Yeah. But so to my question, it is about that history and about that catalog. Going through your entire catalog, like what are some of the titles that you've worked on, projects you've worked on or spearheaded that our audience could look to say, this is my style. This is an example of the style you're going to find in this Kickstarter. And by the way, just based on the nature of this Kickstarter, it'll fit so that they can say, oh, okay, I got it. I know what Alan is all about. I love this and let's jump in. I'm going to get this, but now I can play these other things. And maybe I'm playing a party that's trying to find the Eye of Everywhere while it's being produced. And so they can actually get to a given level. And then when the book drops, they just move right from one of your titles into this. Like where do they go to find that through line?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I started out, some of the early stuff that I did are really just would work well actually with those. There are a lot of one-shot type of adventures that several of them I wrote for a West Marches campaign that I was helping to run right after I got back into the hobby. I've got a couple of low mid-level 5th to 7th type of things with some mind flayers, which are quite popular right now. and a couple of other, one in particular called Still Waters. I think in fact might have been the first thing I did that has an aboleth in it, and that will feature, interestingly, if you look at the cover of the Game Master's Guide, you can get an idea of where that might be going along that. That happens to be, spoilers on that cover, one of the wardens. That is a warden. And I had that piece of art was done by Eduardo Comatant, and he did just a fantastic job bringing the idea that I had for that to life. Honestly, the adventure I'm probably most proud of and happy with is actually a higher level one. It's more for, I think it's 11 to 14 I have on the guide, but it's called Elves in Pink, which was my homage to Men in Black. And
oh, bear with me just a moment. I got to revel in that loveliness right now for just a moment. That is glorious. Please continue.
But yeah, so you in that adventure, you meet up with Kay and Jay, who are two members of the Elves in Pink, a secret society that regulates magic throughout the universe. And they've had a problem at their home base, and they need your help to be able to take care of it.
Nice.
I really had a lot of fun writing that, and it's one I wish more people had glommed onto and being able to see. It is, like I said, it is a little higher level, which isn't as popular, of course, but it was fun.
That is fun.
Nice.
That sounds cool.
I really do the concept. Actually, one of the ones I had put on my wish list was Stillwater Sushi or Steak, because I like the concept of freshwater sog, and I just thought that was a pretty good one. And the title just grabbed me because, if nothing else, there's two of my favorite things in the world is sushi and steak. You had me at go. I'm like, where's my wasabi and horseradish? I'm actually wasabi is horseradish, but I'll get both kinds. So I'm ready for it. But. Yeah, thank you. I love talking with authors who have had a lot of time in their craft and the types of things that they've worked on, and seeing that connective tissue, as Josh likes to say all the time, between their projects and seeing those evolutions. It's a wonderful thing as a fellow content creator, seeing how other people make those transition always is gratifying, because it also helps me figure out what's my next thing, because nobody wants to repeat themselves. But we are us, right? We are who we are. There will always be those connections. But when you know about what those are, it just makes it a little bit better.
I guess that brings us to round 2. D20s to the ready.
Ooh, yeah.
Big money, no whammies. 18.
Yeah. Man, I'm
That's
in
a
a
7
rut.
for me.
I'm out
What
of
do you got?
12. I'm
Okay,
out of
so
12 again.
You get to go
2 in a
second
row.
this time, at least.
Yeah, at least I'm moving up. To the east side.
All
To
right,
a
I got a
Glenn.
piece of that
deluxe
pie.
apartment
Yeah, right.
in the sky. Okay, let's
You
go.
didn't have enough pie
because
at the barbecue? Was it?
There was not pie at the barbecue this year.
How was there not
No,
pie
there
at the
was not.
barbecue?
No pie.
Hmm.
It's very sad.
As you can see, Alan, we're a distractible lot, so that's
Yeah.
that's
75
Hey.
pounds of pastrami, though. I think I made up for the pie.
that's fair. All right,
That's a
Glenn,
lot of pastrami.
save us from the morass, yeah.
Yes, I get to lead off this question and salvage us back onto topic here. So, Alan, for my next trick, I really want to find a way to talk to you about factions. And it's going to come apart in weird little bits as I go, but that's okay. Because you have you have a bunch. You probably know a number. I'm not going
There's
to
a
count.
dozen, yeah.
A dozen,
12,
okay.
I think.
You've got 12 factions that have divided up the city on the ring surrounding the eye, complete with a map for territory and everything, which makes total sense because, especially with so many people from so many places in the world, it's going to draw all kinds. And as everybody knows by now, we're getting ready to launch our own Kickstarter that's featuring factions, and we've learned a lot as we're going through, and we're trying to weave them together and find sources of inspiration. And you've created 12 that fit together within a social dichotomy. Could you talk to us about the factions and how they interrelate to make up the dichotomy of this society, whether or not, and also whether or not you have a favorite faction or a really favored faction interaction, or even if it's a faction conflict? Give us some faction tales.
Okay, the factions actually are where I brought in more of the outside writers to do the real details on those. I had the initial character, as it were. I look at factions as a character, honestly, to start with. Mm-hmm. They require motivations, goals, all of those sorts of things to make them really tick. But I brought in several other writers to flesh those out. I said, here's the skeleton, give me the rest. And they did a terrific job. I've got Sen HHS, who recently was one of the cover writers for Rage of Elements for Pathfinder that just came out. Kirsty Kidd is an author I've worked with several times on other projects, and she's just fabulous. She has an amazing imagination, does wonderful things. Micah Watt has a bunch of stuff on the DMs Guild, and they were really instrumental in helping me out with that. But as far as some of those interactions and favorites go, like I said before, the Betters League is a really good starting point to jump in easy because mercenaries are always needed. Somebody's always waging war somewhere or needs something done that they need to hire out.
And they're always hiring because they're people, they lose.
And they're always hiring because your employee turnover is sometimes a little high.
Attrition. There's a lot of attrition. It's like a call center.
There's one called the Axiom Organica, who believe that biology is the answer to everything. They eschew technology of any kind. They have living computers, living ships, things like that. Anything that you can do with technology, they feel like you can also accomplish with biology. And so that's what they do. But a lot of the time, their experiments don't go as planned, and they have to do a lot of iterations on things in order to get them where they want. So those can be a problem as well. The Halls of Commerce is another one that's very, very easy to get adventures out of, just because there are a ton of corporations that have glommed together, and they are always fighting with each other to be part of what's called the stack, is how they govern each other within that group. And net worth is how positions in the stack are decided. There's always a lot of interplay going on there. The Envoys of Sagacity are a society of inorganic intelligences, and you can in fact play what's called a tech int, which is a autonomous robot essentially, but they're an inorganic intelligence. We have that as one of the playable ancestries or species in the setting. And so they are often at odds with the Axiom Organica because they are the antithesis of biology. The Institute is a repository of knowledge. It's just a vast library. If you've ever been in a used bookstore that's been converted old house, I know I've been in several of those where there's just each room has got the used books in there, and that's what the Institute is, only on a much grander scale. And they are constantly reimagining how they can categorize and catalog the vast amounts of knowledge that they have. So everything is always in flux because there's always somebody that has a better idea of how we could organize all of this stuff. I've got the Void, which is it's almost like a cult, because if you get sent through the portal, through the eye, without a code, it sends you somewhere random in the multiverse. So that's often used as a punishment. It like exile on steroids, I guess you would say. So by far most cases, any place you might end up is probably in the middle of space, which you're not going to last for very long. But occasionally people will get sent through without a code and be able to make it back. And the leader of the Void is one of those people. The Legion of Entropy is just that. They are a group that is they're looking to end the multiverse as we know it. That's their goal. Obviously, there's several more, but yeah, it would be hard to pick a favorite. But
Nice.
There's the interplay, and also in the player's guide, you'll see each little review of the factions has a rumor in it that the players or the characters will hear. And there's, like I said, there's one of those for each faction that the characters can hear, and they could lead to interesting choices, etc., for all the players.
Yeah. The rumors were super cool. Was it the followers of Sagacity? And the rumor about Sagacity was that there's actually a robot, or I'm trying to remember
that it's a supercomputer controlled by the Wardens.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be true. It's a rumor.
Yeah,
Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. So cool.
I liked your used bookstore analogy for the Institute, because I happen to live near a local landmark called the Book Barn, mind you, and in East Lyme, and it's one house that's huge already, and then it expanded. So now it's literally a house, a barn, 6 different sheds. And everything's just spread out everywhere. They've expanded now, too. They've got a storefront downtown, midtown. There's 4 locations, and it's all one giant rotating inventory. It's insane.
What's really cool is if you like a specific type of genre, you'll tend to go to that one of those spots for that, because they'll keep that one thing in that spot. For the longest time, I went Tarzan novels and John Carter from Mars, that type of thing. Those pulp novels when they're in the old black covers with the Frazetta covers on them, Conan. The fact is, sometimes it's just cool to walk around and see something that caught your eye, something that you wouldn't even think about. Like, that's a cool looking knickknack on a shelf, and then there's this cool book next to it, that kind of thing. I love that concept of how to find things, and especially when you're talking about literature. It's an amazing concept, and being able to put something like that in your thought processes and how you're constructing a group, it just has so many great game potentials and NPC potentials. Like, I could see a caretaker for it.
Well, might as well roll right into your question, Lewanika.
Yeah, so I had a couple questions, but I'm always worried about my co-host scooping me, so I'm going to jump right to my good one. What's odd is I would wager that they might not have actually gotten to this question.
There's too much good stuff to talk about in this book. I think the odds of us scooping each other this time around are pretty slim, actually. There's a lot of really great stuff in this book. A little bit.
So. One of these 2 questions, the one I'm skipping or this one, was the one that would be scooped. We'll find out which later on. But so the question here is psionics. Traditionally, psionics has been the toughest nut to crack in any TTRPG.
Left this one alone because I knew one of you two would want it.
It's always been the gold standard. Like, who can do this well? And generally speaking, there's always some element that everybody does well, but the rest of it's trash, right? Or the rest of it's not good. So knowing that difficulty and seeing that you've done it, my question is, give us a clue as to how you've pulled this together. What were some of the things you felt you had to bring to light through psionics? The things that you just really wanted to be there. Just as importantly, what are the things you felt you had to put in? It wouldn't count. It wouldn't be good if I didn't have this. Also, what were some of the things that you were like, I never want to see this in psionics again. I am so glad I'm writing it, so this can't be part of psionics for this game.
Some strong feelings there, just so you know.
Yeah.
I started off, I had a pretty lofty goal with it, was that I really wanted anyone to be able to take or to make a character from, we've got so many pop culture examples of this sort of thing. Recently, of course, we've got 11 with Stranger Things, even out to Jedi. To me, they are psionic warriors. That's what they're mental warriors. And even in going back older stuff, Scanners, that old movie, if anybody remembers that one. But
we are gentlemen of an age, Alan.
I started playing this game when dinosaurs walked the earth, so it's not.
Yep.
We'll get that out of the way. The one commonality that I came across with all of them was that the powers, yes, they come from your mind, but it's more of a whole body experience. In other words, that every time you see some sort of psionicist, they are straining, and it causes a tremendous amount of stress in their body to be able to do the things that they do. Look at Yoda after he's moved the X-Wing in Empire Strikes Back. He's exhausted, and again with 11 has got the nosebleeds and all of it. Everything that happens, it takes a toll on their body as well. So that was the concept I really went in with, and also deciding that a Constitution-based class for both 5e and Pathfinder was really where I wanted to go, because it was something that really hadn't been explored that much. And that was really where I wanted to explore and get to. There's a table when you're creating your character that you choose a physical manifestation of what happens when you use your powers. So if you wanted to have the nosebleeds like 11, you could have maybe veins pop out on your head, or maybe your eyes turn a different color, or they glow, or there's several different options, or you can come up with your own to do that. So there's that storytelling element there as to how your character manifests these abilities. Then I came up with the stress mechanic, where you do not have spell slots. None of that. You can use your talents, your abilities as many times as you're willing to, and eventually, once you have a amount of stress that you can take, that's called, the limit of that is called your stress threshold. And once you have passed that, then you start eating away at your own hit points. As long as you're willing to keep doing that, you can keep using your abilities. So it's a real give and take. This class is not for the risk averse. So if you're not willing to take some chances with your own life or livelihood as a character, this class probably isn't for you. But that's really where I wanted to go with it, was to get that feeling of this is using your essence to be able to manifest these powers, these abilities.
Oh. Lewanika and I were actually...
I said that was absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Lewanika and I were talking just the other day about for 5e, specifically for Dragonlance, a Constitution-based spellcaster, a la Raistlin Majeri. All magic users in Kryn kind of put their own essence into their spells, and it gets away at them like that. Yeah, that's a really cool concept.
I have a follow-up, if you don't mind, because I've did leave psionics and the psion class alone because I knew one of you two would want to talk about it. But I did find the stress and the stress threshold mechanic really neat. And I liked the idea of being able to continue to dig deeper and go through your hit points. The one thing it left me wondering, because I did not take the time to try to do the math to figure it out, was how does your stress threshold and the way that it's calculated, which is con modifier plus proficiency bonus plus level as a total number of points versus the cost of the spells, how does that compare with a traditional magic user? Can they get about the same number of spells out that a wizard can, as an example, before they're eating into their own hit points?
No, and that was by design because your primary ability is Constitution, you're going to be having more hit points than a typical caster anyway. So the stress threshold, obviously, like I said, it increases as you go up in level. If you take a look at, say, a 20th level traditional caster, and if you take all of the levels, spell levels as points, and slots, etc. I think it comes out to 88, if I remember right, something like that. Whereas, so if you say a 9th level spell is 9 points, you have one of those, you have etc. Blah blah blah. And so obviously your stress threshold at 20th level is not going to be anywhere near 88.
That's going to be like 31.
But you will have quite a few more hit points than that traditional wizard caster, and I expect people who are playing with feats, they're going to game this, of course, and they're going to go in and take the toughness feat, things like that to boost that.
I definitely didn't expect it to go as high as a regular caster because they even reduce their stress just with a half an hour rest, so they have the ability to recharge it. I was really wondering as to how it compared, and that's fantastic. I love that it comes out at about that level 31 versus the 88 because of their short rest recharge ability and the ability to chew into their own hit points. That is really groovy.
I've always felt that is the missing element for the warlock for me, like the ability to beg, borrow, and steal from your own essence to carry on with the mission for your patron power. I'm fully on board with the fact that the lesser number of things that they do and all of that, but it seems to me what it's missing is that ability to sacrifice, which in theory is part of the narrative, but it is certainly not part of the mechanic. And I think that would be an interesting way if Theorycraft, among content creators, if we were to rebuild what the Warlock looked like, taking something like this mechanic and applying it to the Warlock would be definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I mentioned before, I played in high school and through college in the 80s and early 90s. And so what I played was first and second edition. Yeah. And then I left the game for a long period of time. And I missed third and fourth editions and came back just after the start of fifth. And looking at fifth, and I saw the Warlock, and I looked through it and thought, why was this not a Constitution based? Why did we need another charisma based caster when there was already 1, 2, or 3 of them? And so it made no sense to me at that point, and that was where I think I probably started even then thinking about this, the ways to make this happen. So
I've always felt that sorcerers should probably be Constitution based, because if it's inherent in their blood and their makeup, charisma doesn't have anything to do with that. If you're thinking about
why would you have to have good personality to be able to be a sorcerer? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, mechanically it is what it is. Maybe that in a world where one of the two of them should be Constitution, maybe not both, but one or the other needs to be a Constitution.
And the sorcerer thing is not about having a good personality. It's about having the magical nature, as opposed to, in charisma, it's like the best option. I don't know. Yeah. Although Constitution would be pretty great, I think. But that's
seemed like the pendulum kind of swung. I noticed, like I said, coming back from starting in first and second edition, charisma was always your dump stat.
Yep. Yep.
Unless you wanted to try to play a paladin, that was always your dump stat. And then now you have the swing where all of these classes are using charisma and everything else. I thought it was interesting to see that pendulum swing.
Yeah. All right. I finally get my round 2 question, and that's probably our last question for the night. So after I'm done here, we'll have you talk about where to find the Kickstarter and go for that. The question that I wanted to ask, and I was really happy to hear you mention Star Wars a couple times in that last answer, because that was one thing that struck me about the material that you sent over, is that it felt like Star Wars. It felt like a bunch of different things to me. It felt like Star Wars. It felt a lot like Blade Runner. I saw a lot of Blade Runner in there. And so I wanted to get from you.
Totally see Blade Runner.
Right? Yeah. What I wanted to get from you is I saw all these influences in there, but what do you think are the influences that are really in the DNA of the Eye of Everywhere? What are the things that you tried to draw from to go ahead and bring this some degree of familiarity or even some factor of coolness?
Yeah, D, all of the above.
Exactly. Yeah.
It really, again, my love of all of this stuff is what I want to shine through, and that's what I love. Star Trek, I love Star Wars. The fact that we can make a superhero movie now with the technology we have, that it actually looks real and everything else, I love that. And honestly, D&D and Pathfinder characters, once they get past 10th, 12th level, that's what they are essentially, as superheroes, if you really think about it. Even traditional fantasy and all of that stuff, it's all things that I love, and I wanted to have in my game and have the players be able to live out those fantasies together. If Joe over here wants to play Conan the Barbarian, and Sally over here wants to be like you said earlier, Glenn, a space marine from Alien or something like that. Though, let's bring all that stuff together, man, and let's go. Let's do it. Let's have the wizard who wants to go to the hind end of space and have an alien bug hunt, or let's have the computer hacker who likes to play with knives go visit the wizard tower and rescue a fey prince. Let's do all of it. Let's do all of it together.
Yeah, nice.
I love that.
And again, like so many shades of like the great things that we have been able to go ahead and review. Like we've been playing a bunch of Star Trek Adventures lately on the channel, just because it's a fantastic system. It's a lot of fun. But what it does more than anything else is really, the mechanics really support the narrative flow. And that's what I'm hearing a lot from this too, is that the things like the faction die and stuff like that, that's really there in place to go ahead and support telling these awesome stories that you want to go ahead and tell with all these various factions and everything going together.
And share.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
I almost made a Ferengi comment about the Commerce faction earlier. But
absolutely. Alan, this has been fantastic. Thank you so very much for taking some time tonight to talk us through this. How can our listeners find your Kickstarter so that they can go ahead and support this fantastic product?
Yeah, just get online. I will be spamming all the socials as much as I can.
As one does with the Kickstarter, yes.
As one does. But if you get on Kickstarter and just search Eye of Everywhere, it should pop up, and awesome. You can give it a pledge. We will have, as we've talked about before, there are both full versions for 5e and Pathfinder. These will be separate books. And you can, if you want to only get the player's guide, which will have all the classes and the species and ancestries and all of that stuff, spells, etc., in there, you can do that either in PDF or print. Or if you just want the Game Master's Guide, which will have more of the setting information, the monsters, the other goodies that will have probably at least one adventure, etc., in there, you can do that. In PDF and print, and then we will have options to get both at a discount in the Kickstarter, either just PDF or anytime you get print, you'll also get the PDF as well for free.
Cool. Awesome.
Excellent.
Next week, we have got the production crew from the movie that's on Amazon Prime, The Secrets of Blackmore. It's all about the early days of D&D and how it was constructed. It's a fantastic movie. If you haven't watched it yet, first of all, you really need to watch Secrets of Blackmore before you listen to our episode, because the episode is going to be just full of spoilers, so you want to make sure you go ahead and watch that ahead of time. But that's going to be a fantastic interview. We've got the production crew from the movie coming on, so it'll be a good time. Alan, thank you so very much for coming on and checking this out tonight. So everyone go out there, check out The Eye of Everywhere on Kickstarter. And while you're at it, check out The Traveler's Guide to Factions on Kickstarter also. Make sure you back on both. We'll make sure to send this out to our backers and make sure and put the link in our show notes so that people can click down below and get in contact there. Thank you everybody out there for listening. Hope that you appreciated it. There is some Patreon exclusive content to this episode. So if you are interested, make sure you go ahead and go to www.patreon.com/ttjourneys. Join up there, help support the show, and get some fantastic exclusive content. And we'll be back next week talking about Secrets of Blackmore. Until then, have a good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
Thank you for joining us. This has been Tabletop Journeys. We would love to hear your feedback on our show today. Join us at www.ttjourneys.com, where you can subscribe to the blog to leave comments and see all the content that we publish beyond the podcast.
You can also stay in touch by subscribing to our Twitter, Tumblr, or Instagram at TT Journeys, joining our Facebook group, Tabletop Journeys, or by sending an email directly to podcast@ttjourneys.com. Our full episodes come out every week on Friday, and every Tuesday features actual play and gameplay showcase episodes. Looking for early access? You can support the show and get episodes before everyone else at www.patreon.com/TT Journeys. Check it out today and see all the awesome benefits we bring to our supporters.
Lastly, if you're listening to us on Stitcher, iTunes, Podchaser, Spotify, or Audible, we would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to the podcast on that platform. Thank you for listening and for being a part of our growing community. And we bid you fair tides, friends, for legends await.
Here's a preview of the Traveler's Guide to Factions.
Commonwealth Records started out collecting and preserving the folk art and the folk music of the world around them. So Commonwealth Records is a faction of bards and scholars and historians that are dedicated to exploring every culture they can come across.
The Soul Society. This is a group that represents seekers of untold lore. This faction is a bunch of academics. They're sleuths. They're amateur adventurers, archaeologists of sorts.
The Ember Weavers are that mix between super technological group and super magic. They are very much a group that represents the merging of those two things with a kind of industrial twist.
The Hands of Providence are a conclave of Aasimar prophets, soothsayers, and other fortune tellers and seers that all share a common vision for the future.
This is the Thunder Swarm. They're not an organized military. They're not technically religious zealots because they're there to help. But when good people are in need of help, the God of Tempest has a way of bringing in the storm that's going to wash evil clear.
The Order of the Ivory Compass is a quasi-military organization of buccaneers and privateers and basically merchant marines. They started as a group that was meant to protect shipments, definitely a group that has maybe forgotten its roots on some level.
The Guardians of the Grave are a cadre of viciously dedicated undead hunters that seek out and destroy any kind of undead that exists. The line between life and death should never be broken, and they kill all undead.
This is the Outriders League, a league of professional soldiers that are specifically involved in scouting, pathfinding, trailblazing, and espionage.
The Wharfman Weft is a multiverse spanning organization of spies and fixers run by an incredibly ancient hag. It could be any form of Baba Yaga type dealmaker, Ursula from The Little Mermaid, just to go in another direction.